Welcome to EFT Expert Interviews, where we talk to renowned EFT practitioners on topics that can transform your life. These are live interviews where you can ask questions and get answers from the speaker. I'm your host, Stefan Gonick from EFTalive.com and singletosoulmate.me. And today we're talking to Emma Roberts on the topic of EFT and your cancer diagnosis. So Emma Roberts is an EFT founding master and an EFT international trainer. She is the co-founder of the EFT Centre in London in the UK. She is the author of Even Though I Have Cancer, which is a self-help book derived from her work with the Breast Cancer Haven charity in London, aimed at supporting those dealing with the cancer diagnosis, as well as providing a reference manual for practitioners looking to be involved in this field. So welcome, Emma. It is so wonderful to have you.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thank you, Stefan, for the invitation.
Yeah, I am delighted. This is a very important topic.
Yes.
Another thing I wanted to say, actually, so this is live. You guys who are watching live can enter comments and questions at any point. You don't have to wait, and I'll see it pop up and right over there. And then I will just introduce them at an appropriate moment. There will be a formal live Q&A at the end, so stay on till then. But anyway, let's get started with the questions. So Emma, I always like starting with the origin question. Like, how did you get into all this?
How did I get into EFT or cancer or both?
Working with cancer using EFT.
With cancer. Okay. Yeah. I used to volunteer at a breast cancer charity here in London. Initially, I started off volunteering with EFT. They were very, very open-minded charity, actually, because I'm going back 20 years when EFT was not a well-known thing, but their founder was a health kinesiologist and was very keen on energy psychologies, full stop. So I used to volunteer with individuals there. Then that turned into a paid role. And then a little bit later, like about, I suppose, 15 years ago, Sue Beer, who I work with, and I started running groups for women with at all stages of breast cancer. We'd run regular monthly groups, and we saw extraordinary things happen, actually. And I've been working with EFT for quite a few years before that, and I've also studied psychology, and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and NLP master prac. So I was already in practice, but I really learnt on my feet, supporting people through in all sorts of different ways, and it's kind of expanded from there. And for me, the most exciting thing about working in this field with the tapping is that it's the one thing that you can give to people and they can take it away and use for themselves. And I have to say, the cancer community, if I can call it that, are fantastic as far as clients are concerned, because they want to heal. They desperately want to heal, and so they will use any tools that are available to them. And using the tapping to kind of navigate not just the emotional journey, but actually the physical journey as well, and support themselves is just life-altering, I think. I really do. I think it makes such a difference to people, and that's the feedback I've had consistently over a long, long time now. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
What you mentioned as you were describing all that certain miraculous things happened. I'm curious what some of the examples were.
Where do we begin, really? First of all, I would say I can't put it all down to EFT, although in a way I do. We did a pre-pilot study working with a group of women at the charity, working with the side effects of hormonal treatments like tamoxifen and things, which have put them into early menopause, working with things like hot flushes, lack of sleep, all that sort of thing. And it was a 12-week study. Yeah, it was 12 weeks. And basically we taught them how to tap on themselves, about their feelings around the symptoms, and their feelings actually when they were experiencing things like hot flushes, if they remembered, which they tended to, actually. And at the end of the day, everybody, without exception, I mean, there were a couple of people who dropped out, actually, but apart from that, everyone without exception had positive feedback, and their scales went down as to what they were suffering from, if you like, with the side effects. And it was very, very simple. It was, phrases like, even though I'm afraid of the tamoxifen, even though I'm feeling really hot, even though I'm not happy, whatever was coming into their minds, or even though I'm resent having to take this stuff for 5 years, etc., etc. But it significantly lowered the side effects. So that to me, that was really interesting. Unfortunately, they ran out of funding, and in fact, in COVID, the whole charity folded, so they didn't actually take it any further. But it's there for anybody who wants to pick it up. As a research project, that was one of the things, and on individuals too, I see huge shifts in their relationship with the disease, because a cancer diagnosis is a shock. Even if you think you might, maybe, possibly, but the actual diagnosis moment is a huge shock to the system, and your world changes. Everything changes at that point. Your future plans change. You don't know how you're going to be, how you're going to navigate the world, how you're going to keep working, whatever it is. And to be able to support yourself emotionally through some of those changes and that shock is enormous. Sometimes I would say it's better to do it with someone who can hold a safe space for you.
Mhm.
But, there are so many different ways that the tapping can support somebody going through that experience. And I'm
Well, I imagine that the initial shock includes just a terror that you're going to die from this cancer.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there are so many different, I suppose in tapping terms, we call them aspects, different areas and different responses. No two people have the same response. Even if you say it was you and I, and we both had a fear of dying, that fear of dying would show up differently for you than it does for me, depending on our history, actually, as much as anything else. So you can never kind of make a sweeping statement, well, it's like this for everybody. It's for people to explore what things mean for themselves, if you like. But yeah, there's the fear of death, obviously, is a huge one. Fear of treatment. Things like fear of needles, fear of MRI scanners, those sorts of things. The claustrophobia when you're kind of stuck in one of those things. Fear of chemotherapy or radiotherapy. And the other thing, fear of money. How are you going to support yourself or your family or whatever it is when you're going through this, because you may not be able to work. There's so many different areas that can be helped. I'm not going to say, oh, well, yeah, you can sort it out and get yourself an income. Maybe you can, I don't know. But there are so many different areas that need to be approached. Hello, Kat.
My interview cat. There you go.
I'm so used to, I can't tell you the amount of cats that show up on our trainings. It's fascinating.
It was my therapy cat that he often sits in my lap in a session with a client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Animals are hugely healing.
Yeah.
Okay, but so it's all different areas, from how you're going to manage on an everyday basis to the long-term future, what the prognosis is, how you're seeing your future, how you saw it before, the grief, the loss of that, because regardless of what happens with a cancer diagnosis, whether it leads to total healing or to the other extreme, to death, the future that you thought you had before that moment of diagnosis no longer exists. Everything is kind of thrown up in the air, like a puzzle, really, like puzzle pieces, and has to reform in a different way. And it's managing that too. We know that the tapping in and of itself reduces cortisol levels. Well, if that's the very least it does in a cancer diagnosis, that's massively powerful. Massively powerful.
Because you're in a state of constant high stress, that's going to take a really big toll on your
Exactly.
body that's trying to heal.
Exactly. I've worked with various oncologists over here, mainly, well, all over here actually in the UK, and I get referred to people because they like their clients to be calm, or their patients, I should say, to be calm, because they get better results when the patient is in a calmer space without that cortisol or adrenaline running. That's, it's not really rocket science, is it? We all know that. But that's what the tapping can do, which is amazing, wonderful.
Now, there's some schools of thought that say that diseases like cancer, in fact, most of the diseases that we deal with, can have an emotional basis that is sort of the root cause of that disease. Are you in that camp that believes that?
I suppose maybe I've got half a foot in that camp. I think that the emotional side of things is massively important and that there are emotional triggers for sure. But I don't think that's all it is. Absolutely not. I'm very much, I look on the tapping as being sort of a complementary as rather than alternative. And it eases the path of any form of treatment, allopathic or otherwise, that people choose. But I think are you talking about things like metamedicine and New German medicine and things where they'll pinpoint a particular thing as being the cause?
Well,
I,
within the camp that thinks that unhealed emotional wounds can be the root cause of an illness, there's two subcamps within that.
yeah,
There's the subcamp as exemplified by German New Medicine that says, well, if you have this disease located in this location in your body, it means this this emotional wound. Like they even for breast cancer, like two different wounds depending on which breast it is and stuff like that.
yeah.
So there's
That's,
that camp, and then
yeah.
there's the other camp which says there, we believe that unhealed emotional wounds has resulted in the disease you have, but there's no specific
Mm,
correlation that this disease comes from this kind of wound, and we
yeah.
have to explore and discover what wound it was that caused this for you.
I think this is quite dangerous territory because you become, as a practitioner, because you can become diagnostic. And I think you want to be working it out for the individual, what's going on for them, not, oh, you've got something there, that means it must be, usually mother, I think it is what they tend to say.
It's always mother.
Yeah, usually, or female anyway. But I think that runs into the danger of missing clues. I'd rather explore with my client the emotional side of it. And I absolutely do think the emotional side has a huge contribution, but I'm not going to sit here and go, that is the cause,
Okay.
because I don't know. I really don't know. The cause could be chain smoking 20, 40 cigarettes a day for 40 years. Well, yeah, that'll have an emotional root, obviously.
Right.
But so it's not, I just think people, when people hear that sort of comment, it can cause a lot of just emotional disturbance and guilt and sort of, oh, I brought it on myself, and that's kind of not, it misses the point, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
It's but yes, I do think there's always an emotion at the root of it, alongside other things. Something causes that cellular change, something turns our immune system off enough to allow the enemy in, if you like. And
Right.
that can be, I do think that can be trauma, well, is trauma to a certain extent, and shock, and I think they're learning more and more about that. I mean, now, certainly in the medical field over here in the UK, they're much more aware of the emotional impact on the physical body, and listening to it. And the EFT is becoming more accepted. I've got colleagues who've been training in our health service and things, which is quite an exciting place to be. But I prefer the preventative approach. Let's get everyone tapping before anything happens, and then
Right.
maybe we can prevent anything happening. And we have, obviously we have lots of ways of working with the tapping, doing that. That was a long answer, sorry.
That's good. That's what I'm looking for is to understand your approach. So
Yeah.
it sounds like, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just to check that if I got it right. It sounds like you're definitely not in the camp that, this disease is caused by this emotional wound, but you are sort of at least partly in the other camp, which is, certain unhealed emotional wounds could contribute to developing the disease,
Contribute, yeah.
which would also imply though that if you heal that wound, that contribution is resolved, it's removed.
Yes, absolutely. But I do think you've got all sorts of other things, lifestyle choices, nutrition, exercise, all that sort of thing, situational life. There's so many other stresses that go into it.
Yeah.
It's about, also unpicking what's causing the stress on the immune system to sort of switch off the immune system to a certain extent. And of course, once you've had a cancer diagnosis, it's kind of, you're trying playing catch up all the time on that one,
Yeah.
really. But having said which about things like German New Medicine and things, I'm not throwing them out at all here. What I'm saying is I do come from the opposite side, but if it can be quite interesting when you work with when I work with somebody one to one, and then I look the stuff up after we've worked through their traumas. Very often it does make sense according to them as well, but not always.
Right. Yeah, I actually also work with people with physical, illnesses and
Mm.
pain and various things like that. So body issues. And I have this book that I use where you can look up, this illness could be caused by these emotional issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I get a new client, I always start there because it's quick and easy when it's right. So I'll just open up the book to that entry and I say, I'm going to read this to you. Let me know if it rings any bells for you. And I
Mm-hmm.
read it, and sometimes they'll go, "Oh my God, that's me to a T." And I go, "Okay, found it." Right?
Yeah.
And other times I read it, and go, nah. And then
Yeah.
we start exploring. It's like, okay, so what is going on for you personally?
Exactly, and I think it's
Yeah,
the exploring, the detective work in that's a really valuable thing, because otherwise I think you run the danger of missing things.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
So, what kinds of things do you do when you get a client who's dealing with cancer? What are the different ways that you?
Sorry. Yeah.
It's
Well, there
okay.
are different ways of approaching it.
Yeah, that you
Well,
approach it.
it's individual, isn't it? But the very first, well, obviously you take a full history. When were they diagnosed? I want to know what was going on in their life 5 to 10 years beforehand. Any specific kind of, I describe it as take your breath away shocks,
Mhm.
apart from the actual diagnosis, which obviously falls usually into that camp as well. The first thing I would do would be to teach them how to tap. If somebody is presenting and they're in physical pain, if I start going on about the emotional side of it, I'm going to lose them. So I would work with the physical first, if that was the case. I work with whatever somebody presents within a framework. So I know the areas I
Actually, I'm a little
want.
confused by what you just said. You said if they have physical pain, what, and you'll lose them? I missed the connection.
If somebody turns up and they're in pain, and I try to take them to the emotions,
Oh, I see. Okay.
they're not going to be able to go there until you've taught them a way to reduce the pain. And the tapping is actually you'll know this is a very good, effective way of reducing pain in the moment.
Right.
Sometimes that lasts completely. Other times it might come back. It's also a really helpful way for people to learn to tap on themselves,
Mhm.
because it doesn't require any real questioning. There's just kind of 3 main rules for it. And then, you know,
What
it will,
what are your 3 main rules? That sounds intriguing.
oh, Stefan, I'm sure you know them. It's how you
Well, not for
describe
me,
it.
for the
No,
audience.
I know. It's how you describe it to yourself, basically. So the first one would be the location of the pain. And
Mhm.
when I say that, with EFT, we're always looking for getting really specific. So kind of not, I've got backache. In our terms, that's too global. It would be, this ache on the tip of my right shoulder blade, or something like that. So it's really specific. We'll think of it a bit like putting a postcode on a letter. You want the work to go absolutely to that place. So that's the first one, location. The second one is the quality, because pains can be, well, they don't necessarily have to be pains, do they? They can be aches or hurts or whatever. So it's how you
It could be
just,
sharp or dull or
yeah, yeah,
electrical or
exactly. Yeah.
other things, yeah.
Pulsing, constant, intermittent. I mean, we have a huge vocabulary that goes around those. So then, you'd have the location and you'd have the quality. So maybe this throbbing pain on the tip of my right shoulder blade or something like that.
Mhm.
And then I think it's very useful when you're working on yourself is to give it a number. We call them SUDs, but it's a scale of 0 to 10 as to how intense that pain is when you start, and then check in on it as you do a few rounds. And pain's a strange thing because it moves. Quality will change, the pain will move. So
When you say move, you mean change location?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So what you would do then is you chase that. We call it chasing the pain. So you change your wording for yourself to, okay, even though I've got this, maybe it's still throbbing pain on the tip of my left shoulder blade. It's shifted sides. Pains do this. It's extraordinary, really. Um, until you've got your SUDS, your 0 to 10 scale reduced enough to either be comfortable and you've got bored. Well, if you've got bored, you can assume you're comfortable enough. But if not, and if you get stuck, then you have to look for the underlying emotions. So at that point, you might ask yourself a question like, how do I feel about this pain? Or if there was an underlying emotion, what might it be? Which sounds to a lot of people like a really weird question. But by the time you've done enough tapping on the pain, it's like your unconscious mind has got the hang of this and will just offer you the next piece. And then you'd move into that. So, okay, even though I feel really angry about this, or whatever, resentful, whatever comes up, frightened about it, and you want to kind of, work with the emotions around the pain. So that's where I would start if someone showed up in pain.
Okay.
If, on the other hand, they showed up with a diagnosis, but there wasn't any pain in the moment, I would start with how are they feeling about it? What do they want? How do they want to feel? And what's going on for them right now? And explore all the different areas, asking questions, which people can do for themselves, asking questions of kind of, so what's the most important thing to start working with? And I said earlier, we've got various fears. We've got the shock of the diagnosis. We've got the fears of the treatment, the needles, the unknown is a huge one. We have the unknown. Loss of control, because suddenly everybody else is controlling your life and your environment, which is one of the beautiful things about having the tapping. That gives you a sense of control, I think, a little bit of autonomy in the whole thing. Just what is it for them? Very often, if you go, if I have a client come to me, they'll tell me things that they can't tell their family, they can't tell their friends, their deepest fears that they don't want to put onto anybody near them. So we'll work with those. It depends on who shows up really and what they want, but all these different components all go into the work. You probably realise this isn't a short-term work. This is long-term, but if you can accompany someone on that journey, regardless of the end result, actually, and as a practitioner, you have to get out of the way of having an investment in the outcome in order to be a clear space for the work to kind of, happen through you. But it's a real honour to accompany people on that journey, whatever the outcome. And if the outcome is actually death, I've worked with people in hospices and things, and we've all got to do it at some point. So if it can be peaceful and with this element of acceptance, that's a lot better, not just for the person, but also for those around them. The carers. It's a really tough call to care for somebody with a cancer diagnosis, and they'll be feeling all the same emotions as well, but they won't be able to talk about them either. They're not going to say to their loved one, "Oh, I'm really scared," usually, because they don't want to put that on them. So, but they can bring that to me. Sometimes, in the charity, not so much now because I'm on more one-to-one clients, but in the charity, you get the family group would come in and teach them all to tap, and they tap together, and it was really, really bonding and sort of healing for them. And what would happen is people would start off a little bit anxious about what they were going to say, understandably, so we might do a bit of silent tapping. And then someone would start speaking, and they'd find they're all running the same stuff, but nobody wants to talk to anyone else about it because it's really hard, and the things that they've seen and all that sort of stuff. If you can clear the level of trauma, it enables people to be much more present to the person with the diagnosis. And also, it's a tool, it's a tool. People need ways to support themselves. There's not much out there for the carers and the family, and they, obviously there's things like fear of the future, fear of the impact of the diagnosis, all that sort of thing, which they can't share with the person really, often not honestly. But so, as a practitioner, as you hold a space for some fairly intense stuff, actually, and also working with them, supposing that their family member, or whoever it is, their loved one, does pass over. They've still got you to come back to hold that, and they can say all the things that, they saw or they felt, or what's going on with the grieving process as well. Not to say that the tapping wipes out a grieving process. Of course it doesn't. That's completely natural, but it helps it process in, I think, a really beautiful way, actually. I mean, I've experienced that with clients, but I've also experienced it for myself, you know?
Yeah, it makes it flows more gently through our
Mm.
system.
It's not about people. People often talk about tapping things away. It's not about tapping it away. It's about acknowledging what is and clearing the path, as you say, through the system. You know, I can speak from very much from first-hand experience of all of this as well. Not that I've had cancer, thank goodness, but I've accompanied people that I've loved very much through that journey. And not everybody's destined to survive it. A lot of people, however, are. Medicine is hugely improving, certainly over here. You know, the changes are dramatic since I started doing this work. Extraordinary with immunotherapy and all these things that are coming out now. And EFT is the ultimate complementary therapy. It goes with absolutely anything and everything. I always say it's not loud, it just goes with everything. I think it should be taught in schools, but anyway, that's a different subject.
I actually have 2 cats now. The second one is
I can see. That's all right.
like one's coming. Do you have any interesting examples of, experiences you've had with different clients?
I've got so many examples, but yes, I mean, I think of, well, one very close colleague from many years ago who I worked with from, gosh, it must have been about 2003. She actually eventually did die last year, but I worked fairly regularly with her throughout. It was started off with breast cancer, then it went to the bones, and it went to her brain. But over a very long period of time, when she was diagnosed, she was told, 5 years maximum. Well, she did pretty much nearly 25 years, 23 years or something. And she really used it in all the areas that I've talked about. But what she also added to it was meditation and visualization, but specific visualization. She'd visualize the like, say, the chemotherapy, which she called the silver elixir of life. She reframed it from being poison to actually something that was helping her live, which it did for a very long time. And tapping around on accepting that and things. And also right up till the end. And at the end, yes, she did die, but she died peacefully, surrounded by her family, all of whom also knew how to use the tapping, also to support her when I wasn't there. And right at the end, what I would say is tapping is too aggressive, but rubbing the points, because she was, I won't say she was the exception, but quite often when people are dying, and I don't want to make this all about dying because it's absolutely not, but in this case, people don't want to touch them. They're scared of touching them. But actually getting her family to just rub the points, or even just the finger points, she found incredibly soothing and calming. And she was somebody who took it. I'd say she was a colleague. She wasn't a tapping colleague. I used to work in a doctor's practice, and she was within that. But she took it and used it because she recognised how much it was helping her. She taught me a huge amount, actually, because we worked through literally everything that I've been talking about earlier at various times. Is that I've worked with parents who've lost children, and as talking about carers, and providing a safe space so they can just let go, tell me all the things that they've seen that they can't even speak to their other half about, let alone anything else, and just tapping through it. It's not about directing it. It's not about digging underneath it. It's just about being with it, but tapping, a lot of tapping, which I'm told was hugely useful. Working with people through chemotherapy, and then afterwards, when for instance with tamoxifen, put onto a tamoxifen. I've got a client at the moment who's having struggles with that.
And just to remind people, tamoxifen shuts down the estrogen system.
Yeah, it puts you into menopause.
Right.
Basically, yeah. It's quite a tough ride for some people, not for everybody, but for some people, it's quite a tough ride. Working with clients who don't come with the cancer as a primary issue. Actually, they come with depression or anxiety about the cancer, and being able to again empower people. I can't state the value of that enough to anybody who's listening. Learn how to tap and just use it. You can't do it wrong. You might not be as effective as seeing a practitioner, but that doesn't matter. You will be effective. You'll lower the cortisol. Things will happen in the body, and you'll feel it. That's the thing. I mean, it's so noticeable, the shifts in people, and they last. Usually, they do last.
Have you ever heard of the book Love, Medicine, and Miracles?
Bernie Siegel, isn't it?
Bernie Siegel, yeah.
Yeah, I've got it on the shelf behind me. Yes, I love that book.
And he has a sequel, similar name, Three Things Again, but I forgot.
I have to think of that book. It's kind of like, I could have written that. I mean, I couldn't have written it because he's brilliant at writing, but it's absolutely,
similar experiences. Well, one of the things that stood out for me in that book and what you were saying earlier in this interview was by tapping. Well, he didn't talk about tapping, but by tapping, he talked about being an extraordinary patient, right?
Yeah.
And what he meant, this is a patient who was not meek and submissive. Like, God-like doctors, just do whatever you gotta, whatever you need to do. I trust, I put myself in your hands, and I don't, I'm not going to bring in my own ideas or anything. And he said those people did a lot worse than the quote problem patients who were very annoying because they questioned everything. And they wanted to be very actively involved in their treatment rather than passively receiving whatever is being given to them. And they want to know the pros and cons of different treatments and be part of the decision process and everything.
Yeah.
But I think, when you get a cancer diagnosis, is really the shock can, even somebody who's normally like a high-powered business executive, you get hit with that diagnosis, and the shock can be so great that you start feeling small and powerless and things like that.
And also, when you get that diagnosis, you have to make all these decisions when you're in a state of shock. And I mean, nobody makes a good decision when they're in shock, really. So you're heavily kind of up for being influenced or whatever, and not taking charge of it yourself. But yeah.
All right. Well, I was just thinking the tapping can help transition someone from feeling weak and powerless and at the mercy of everything around them to being strong and determined and taking charge and being very actively involved. And according to Bernie Siegel, who is a cancer physician, those are the patients who did way better. Yeah,
I completely understand that. Totally get it. I think it's the same in anything in life, isn't it? If you're empowered and you've got a sense of autonomy, a sense of being in charge, or at least part of the process, rather than things being done to you, I think it's really important, really, really important, actually.
Well, I actually found that book very inspirational, even though I didn't have cancer.
Yeah, no, I haven't either, but I love that book. I agree with you completely.
And his second book is good too, if you haven't read that one.
I haven't read the second one. I can't even think what it's called, but certainly that's kind of, I love that. I come back to that a lot.
Yeah.
And the other thing which we haven't actually mentioned is beliefs. It's talking about the medical profession brought me onto this. I would love to get into the medical profession. I'm Master Prac in NLP, which is language patterns and things. I'd love to teach them how to talk to people. It's not a bash because I know they're back to back and they're always saying they want to say it direct and all the rest of it. But the beliefs that people take on often from what's told to them in that moment of shock often have to be undone. It's that the white coat syndrome thing, isn't it? It needs to sometimes need to be unpicked. It's not to say that the doctors don't know what they're talking about. Of course they do. It's just what they say and what the patient who's in shock in front of them takes on can be completely different.
So explain the white coat syndrome for those who don't know it.
Well, it's when you give, it's exactly what you were just talking about actually with Bernie Siegel work. It's when you give the authority to the doctor unquestioningly. Now, I'm not having a bash either at doctors. I think they're great, but sometimes they can deliver things in a rush. And the person who's the patient is flooded with information when they're in this state of shock, which is paralyzing usually for most people. So
Right.
And then a belief is formed. Oh, well, he said this means I must be, they don't tend to give prognosis in weeks or months anymore over here, but I think they do in other parts of the world still. People adhere to it.
Yeah, there was an example in the book of
Mm,
exactly that, where there's this one patient whose tumor was good size, and then it was a man, and he developed the belief that it was going to work out, and his tumor started shrinking dramatically. And then a
mm.
different doctor said something that got him really discouraged, and his tumor. And when I say shrink dramatically, I'm talking over a span of just a few days
Oh, really? Yeah.
without chemotherapy. It
Yeah.
just started shrinking.
Yeah.
And then some other doctor said something to him that got him, made him believe something negative, and it grew back really quickly too. So, and it happened like 4 times. Like his tumor was super responsive to
Yeah.
what he was believing in reaction to what different people were saying to him.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
a really
I
yeah,
mean, our
sorry.
thoughts do create our reality, don't they? We know that. And whether that's external or internal reality, who knows? But that's really interesting. Yeah. I mean,
The wonderful thing about EFT is you can examine the beliefs that you've absorbed,
mhm.
and if you've got any negative ones that you've absorbed, you can address those
Yeah.
and shift it into a much more a positive frame of mind.
Mm.
And to whatever extent this negative belief was going to impact the progression of your disease, you just corrected that.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing there is actually the visualization that you talked about. I often get clients to visualize and literally get them to drop. I suppose this is the hypnotherapist in me, but to drop into their body and to go alongside the tumor. If they've got something obvious like that, what needs to happen? And then see it shrinking, and actually not just seeing it shrinking, but taking some action. So sometimes they'll just take a little soft sponge and just gently wash down the edges. And people get really, really into that actually. And the body seems to follow often. And I've seen that in other areas as well, in fertility and surgery. Some surgery, I've seen that happen. Not all the time, but enough to make it significant. So,
Actually, that reminds me, there's an EFT practitioner. Oh, I'm blanking on her name.
are you going to say Rebecca and Mariner? No,
No, no.
she does all the work on.
She broke her wrist, and she decided to, rather than just, she got a cast, of course, and she was told it was going to take, I think, 8 weeks or something like that for it to heal. Right? I mean, pretty normal thing. And she decided to tap on it, and she tapped on everything she could think of to address about her broken wrist, and her broken wrist healed in 4 weeks instead of 8. And the doctor, she came up for a checkup, and they got a new X-ray to see the progress. And the doctor saw it, and he said, "Oh, it's been like 6 weeks since you broke your wrist." And she said, "No, it's only been 3 weeks since I broke my wrist."
Yeah.
And he was shocked. He was absolutely shocked that it healed
Yeah.
that much in that length of time.
You see, I think that's really exciting. I think we really just don't know quite what we're capable of when there's a kind of a clear run at it. So, I think we're at the very beginnings with this, actually, as to what can happen. I mean, there's a lot of over here in the UK. There are a lot of cancer charities now who have run EFT groups or have a practitioner in under a voluntary basis. We have a lot of students in them. It's really becoming sort of, rather than something out there and a bit odd, something that's kind of almost been normalised within these. And we've taught in hospices, hospice staff, all these sorts of things. It's great. It's a little infiltration.
Well, it's awesome that there's any medical place that's open to incorporating that.
Yeah, it is. It's
My
really
father
been-
was a doctor, and he was not open. He
yeah,
was like really teasing me all the time. He goes, "So, if somebody told you to stick your pinky in your ear and wiggle it, and that'll make you better, would you do that too?"
probably.
And I said, "If it works, yes, I would."
Yeah. And I'm a doctor's daughter and a doctor's daughter-in-law. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, he was very dismissive.
Yeah.
Any other interesting stories you'd like to share before the end?
I'm not sure I've got particularly specific stories. I mean, what I would say is that you can work. Doesn't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter what your diagnosis is. There's always something you can do to support yourself and help yourself on that journey. I mean, I could give you examples of people whose careers come to an end and then are healed through, complementary to allopathic and complementary therapies, including tapping, obviously, who then go out and become this amazing sort of public speaker, reinvent themselves completely. Because I don't think it's possible to go through a cancer diagnosis and heal from it and come out the other end as the same person that went in. I really don't, but I actually say that in a positive sense. People's relationships to themselves, to the world, to everything change in a really powerful way. So I can't give you a specific example of that, but I've seen it happen more often than not.
Or do you have a story where, getting back to the emotional root causes idea, did you ever have a cancer patient client who you did do an exploration and you identified some kind of key wound that seemed to be connected, and you helped that person heal that wound, and their cancer also cleared up? Not to say you can guarantee cause and effect, but did you ever have a case like that?
Yeah, lots. But I'm not going to say it's cause and effect at all, because it's a multidisciplinary approach. You've got
Right.
the medical, you've got nutrition, you've got lifestyle changes, which tapping also supports brilliantly.
Mhm.
Can you imagine being dependent on alcohol, and then getting a diagnosis and being told when you're in shock you've got to cut out alcohol completely, which is your crutch for an emotional support? How are people meant to do that? Well, that's another area that the tapping comes in very, very powerfully. Yeah, I mean, I can't. I'd love to be able to say, oh yeah, this emotional wound cleared up and they healed and it was cause and effect. I just can't say that.
Right.
I
But you've
think,
experienced something like that, at least.
well, I've experienced it, yes, but not on my own. I'm part of a team.
I know. Just saying.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to pin you down, but just
no,
saying.
I can't say it. It would be dishonest for me to say that. But I do think that, to be honest, I think clearing your traumatic history, and trauma is one of those things that is very individual, how we
Yeah.
respond to things in our lives that have happened, clears the path to health, whether it's cancer diagnosis, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, whether it's, anything. I think clearing your emotional history leads to better health and better outcomes. I'll say that.
All right. All right. Well, that's a great stopping place. Now, we're going to be doing the live Q&A next, but
Mhm.
I know there's people who are not going to stick around for that. So in transition, I'd like to ask you, how can people find out more about you?
Well, you've got my website on the bottom of that screen. My name's Emma Roberts, and I'm at the EFTcentre.com in London, and the email address is hello@the EFTcentre.com. Centre spelt the English way.
I was just going to say, for the Americans out there, notice that it's CENTRE rather than TER.
Yep.
And you
Oh,
also have a free gift called,
I do. It's a video of working with cancer, which I've given you a link to with a code put
yes.
in.
So
Yeah.
for this domain name, in case you forget the spelling, and there's a link to the free gift as well in the description of this video. So it's available all the time. And the gift is actually a program that you normally charge for, but there's a coupon code in the description of the video that if you enter that during the checkout process, it makes the thing free.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'm not very techie, so if it doesn't, just email us and we'll sort it out. But I think it should.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the
All right,
plan.
good. I also have a couple of free gifts in the description, but I won't mention what they are. So now's the time for the live Q&A. Surprisingly, there hasn't been any comments throughout the interview up until now.
Okay.
But now's the time to ask your questions or make comments. It doesn't have to be a question.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to be writing something long, I encourage you to write one word, submit that, so I know that something's coming. Like write the word question and submit it, or write the word comment and submit it, and then I'll know to wait for you to finish typing everything, and I'll wait for it. Right. Otherwise, if some time goes by and nobody submits anything, that I'll say, well, I guess that's it, and see you on the next interview. By the way, these interviews happen twice a month, every month for the rest of this year and next year, and I'm going to be doing it for at least 2 years. And I've already lined up interviews from now through next summer.
Wow. Been busy.
And I could have gone beyond that, but I got very caught up in doing the ones we're doing now. So, but there'll be interviews for the second half of next year and the following year and stuff like that. So these interviews have been really cool so far, and I'm looking forward to them to being just as cool going forward. The next interview, by the way, is actually me. I'm going to get interviewed by a friend of mine on the topic of the number one reason. This is for single people. The number one reason, the number one reason why you haven't met your soulmate yet, and how to attract love now. So that's one of my passion topics.
And so you'll get a great audience for that, Stefan. Much needed.
So still no comments. So it looks like we don't have anything. So here's one thing we can do, if you're willing, Emma. We've done this before, and that is, if you're willing, if you could put in a comment on this video, like as soon as we're done, this video will be live, available as just a regular video, and just put a comment saying, you're welcome to reply to this comment with any questions you have, and I'll respond to them. Now, for those of you have a question after the fact, if you don't do it in reply to Emma's comment, she won't get notified that there's a comment there, right? But if you reply to her, if you're willing to do it, is that something you'd be okay doing? Or
I'm happy to do it. I'm just trying to work out the tech side of it. Where do I do it?
Well, we haven't finished the live stream yet, so we have to wait till the live stream ends.
All right,
and then just look up the video on my channel, and you'll see it, and then you just put a comment, and once you add your comment, I will pin it to the top, so it'll always be at the top.
Okay.
And just say, you're welcome to put your questions here in reply to my comment.
Okay, hang on, I'm just writing that down so that I get it right for you.
Okay.
All
right. Well, anyway, it was awesome having you in this, for this interview, and it's such an important topic. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I hope it's useful for people.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it will be.
Yeah, good.
All right. Well, take care, and see all of the rest of you on upcoming interviews. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.